Tá bem. Boa tarde a todos. Bem-vindos a esta sessão de debate. Good afternoon. We are going to start this session, which will be a talk about the films we have just seen. I Am a Revolution in Bush School. And we have with us two dear colleagues and feminists and activists who are going to help us to debate the questions of these powerful films. And we'll also will have joining us the directors of both films, Benedette Argentieri. I'm sorry, just lost my... And the director of Bush School, Emanuela Zuccala, and they will be joining us. And thank you for joining us and for these really, really challenging films and very powerful ones. And I will first give the floor to Janika. She's from Guinean, and she's an activist. She works on feminine genital mutilation, and she's an activist of UMAR, a Portuguese institution fighting for female rights. And this session is organized, is a co-organization of Olhares do Mediterrâneo and UMAR. And I will give you, vou passar a palavra à Janika. She will speak in Portuguese, but she will be happy to answer questions in English. So, Janika, you have about 5 minutes to have a first round.
Ok, obrigada, Emanuela. Obrigada a todas e todos presentes. Sou a Janika, como a Antônia apresentou. Eu sou a técnica da UMAR no projeto MGF, ou seja, projeto da intervenção precoce em igualdade. Trabalhamos na área de MGF, em combate e prevenção da MGF no Conselho de Almada. Gostaria de agradecer esta oportunidade. Nunca tinha assistido o filme. Gostaria de agradecer às realizadoras, que é um filme muito interessante e muito, ao mesmo tempo, muito duro. Muito duro. Falar deste filme não é nada fácil e não vai ser nada fácil daqui em diante para as realizadoras também. Obrigada. Pronto. Em relação ao filme, como eu já disse, É a primeira vez que eu assisti os dois. E em relação ao primeiro filme, que trata da minha realidade, porque eu sou de uma das comunidades afetadas, que é Guiné-Bissau, e em comparação com o caso da Libéria, eu considero o caso da Libéria um pouco mais duro. Isso tendo em conta a situação que o filme nos apresentou, que é baseado na realidade daquela comunidade, onde é uma comunidade fechada, que considera aquela tradição de intocável, isso é mais difícil do que nunca, enquanto que no caso da Guiné-Bissau, a situação já deixou de ser um tabu, e também está a contar com o apoio do Estado, e no caso da Libéria não está a contar com o apoio do Estado, isso é ainda mais complicado. E outro fator que me deixa ainda mais comovida é sobre a questão de tirar as meninas, de levarem mais tempo naquele espaço, mais ou menos uns 3 anos, ou como o filme retratou. Isso é demonstrar que elas perdem uma parte das suas infâncias, adolescências, nesse caso. Enquanto que isso não acontece no caso da Guiné. No caso da Guiné, alguns meses, uns 3 meses de férias, que eles aproveitam, ou elas aproveitam, para levar as crianças para aquele sítio. E da Libéria é complicado, tendo em conta o tempo que essas meninas passam naquele espaço. E a educação, de ser uma educação de mato, uma educação afastada da comunidade, onde não haja muita interação com a comunidade social, assim, eu considero que a educação que elas recebem naquele espaço não é igual com uma educação que iriam ter acesso na escola. Eu respeito as tradições, porque eu sou de uma das comunidades, como já disse, mas eu respeito a tradição desde que não afeta os meus direitos, desde que não põe em causa a minha saúde. Então, sendo assim, eu vou continuar a não apoiar uma organização como o Sandy, em tirar as crianças de um espaço e levar para outro espaço por um tempo muito elevado, e com o intuito de que vão lhes dar educação ou vão formar essas miúdas para serem esposas, né? Para servirem, porque aquilo não é ser esposas, não é? É para servirem aos maridos. Quem, na maioria dos casos, beneficia dessas educações que dão naquele espaço são os homens. Por isso que ainda os homens reforçam de que aquela é uma tradição intocável, porque quem beneficia daquela educação são os homens. E a questão desta educação, antes da colonização, como o senhor no filme frisou, antes da colonização, em algumas comunidades africanas havia educação informal, mas o intuito não era esse, era com outra finalidade, óbvio. Agora, de educar a criança só para ter os ensinamentos para terem utilidades só num certo espaço, aquilo não é uma educação que serve para a vida toda, né? Porque é uma educação que vai servir só para as meninas usarem no espaço de família, no espaço fechado, no espaço de lar, de servirem aos maridos. E onde está a importância daquela educação que vai servir para a vida toda? Tem que jogar. Será que essa tradição mesmo é intocável? Esses ensinamentos que estamos a dar a estas miúdas vai lhes ajudar para a vida toda ou só vai servir para um espaço determinado? E quando essas meninas saem daquele espaço, eles também têm que pensar: será que essas meninas continuam ou vão ter o mesmo estatuto social com os homens? Tem que pensar nisso, porque elas só ganham lá, acredito, um estatuto social para serem mais educadoras dos filhos e para serem responsáveis pelos trabalhos domésticos. E no mundo público, lá fora, será que vão ganhar esse espaço? Este filme nos traz uma reflexão bem grande, nos faz refletir sobre o futuro dessas miúdas, o que vai ser daqui em diante. Como eu falei, que com este filme, a Emanuela a vida dela não vai ser igual à vida que ela tinha antes, porque ela vai acabar agora a se preocupar, aderir àquele problema daquelas miúdas como se fosse um problema dela, que eu não tinha conhecimento dessa realidade, desse tempo que levavam. Sabia que alguns anos atrás o governo tinha aprovado a proibição da mutilação só por um ano, mas depois não houve mais nenhuma discussão em torno disso. Agora, de sabermos essa situação, deste tempo que as miúdas levam nesse espaço, isso parece que tem que merecer a nossa atenção, que é uma luta que ainda está muito atrasada. Precisa da nossa união, da nossa força. Não só fora da África, mas não só dentro da África mesmo, porque alguns países vizinhos que já estão mais avançados, que consideram isso, como a Quênia, então a Guiné-Bissau também tem algumas penas, Senegal, então Uganda, então alguns países que já estão a caminhar devem abraçar essa causa de mostrarem que esses países, a Libéria precisa de mais atenção do que os outros restos dos países com esta prática. E em relação à questão do segundo filme, que é da senhora Margareta, né? Desculpa.
Margareta.
Eu considero que o filme vai trazer uma nova visão das mulheres, uma visão de resistência, né? De ocupação do espaço e de prevenção, ou seja, de promoção de uma igualdade de gênero para futuras gerações, nesse caso. Elas, embora estão a enfrentar duas lutas, a luta é contra aquele tal de Estado Islâmico e a luta contra o sistema patriarcal. Mesmo sendo essas duas lutas que elas estão a enfrentar, embora não vão conseguir ter um resultado de imediato, mas isso é muito motivador, porque mostra essa resistência dessas mulheres nesses diferentes espaços. E eu acho que o filme vai nos permitir ter essas visões de como as mulheres podem aderir à luta de maneira diferente, em espaços diferentes.
Obrigada, Janica. Thank you so much.
Obrigada.
We have just agreed in a bit of change in the sequence. And if Emanuela would like to join us and talk a bit about her film, and then we'll have Clara. Emanuela, are you?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Hi.
Hi. Good evening to everyone.
Thank you so much for this film. It was really inspiring.
Thank you so much for selecting it and for inviting me. Unfortunately, I couldn't understand half of the speech of the activist from Guinea, but I was. I could understand that she was talking about my movie. So
she was mostly talking about this how these bush schools promote a kind of schooling and education for tradition and not for your life in as a schooling education and preparing you for having some rights or profession or something. How these schools kind of reproduce, are made to reproduce tradition, of course.
Yeah, it's true. So
a bit about the film and.
Yes. So the movie The Bush School actually is a part of one of my projects that is it's a huge project about the issue of female genital mutilations in Africa, of course, because unfortunately it's the continent the most affected by this issue, but also about Europe, because we have a lot of migrant women coming from countries where female genital mutilation is practiced. And this project is called UNCUT. I began to work at it. I produced it in 2015, and since then, I'm very proud to say that it has become a sort of international campaign against female genital mutilation and for women's rights, because Uncut is a web documentary, is a series of journalistic publications in many countries in the world. It's another movie that I launched in 2016, and this The Bush School is a sort of latest chapter of this project. And it was very important to me to talk about female genital mutilations in Liberia, because one thing very important to know and to keep in mind is that in the majority of the African countries, female genital mutilation is illegal, as it has to be. Of the 27 countries in Africa where female genital mutilation is practiced, there are today only 5 countries left where female genital mutilation is legal. So it's not considered a crime, which is a very severe wound, of course, for women's rights. And Liberia is one of these 5 countries. The activist before was talking about Guinea-Bissau. Guinea-Bissau has a law against female genital mutilation. Of course, a law is not the solution, because even in countries where there are laws criminalizing female genital mutilations, people continue to practice it. But the law is important because it's important that the state, the government, stands against this harmful practice. So in Liberia, female genital mutilation is legal, and it's endorsed by the government, because these bush schools are have been receiving regular licenses from the government. And so this movie talks about these bush schools, which are schools literally inside the forest, because Liberia is mostly composed by the forest, these are schools where the girls of different ages, they can enter at 3 years old or at 18 years old. There is not a rule in their age. They learn only how to behave as future wives, future mothers, and they remain totally illiterate. The activists in Liberia told me that most of the girls after this bush school don't want to come back to the regular schools, because they feel that they have, also the families feel that these girls have received all the education they could receive. I don't know if I should stop for the translation or not. Sorry. Should I stop for the translation? Because I couldn't, I didn't know.
No. It's
no, I go on. Can I go on a bit?
Yeah, of course. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. So the important thing is that the right of entrance in these bush schools is female genital mutilation. So we can say that the Liberian government endorses not only these bush schools, but also the practice of female genital mutilation. And I spoke to the politician at the Ministry of the Interior, who is in charge of giving licenses to these schools, and he told me that female genital mutilation is very important because it's a part of the curriculum, the CV of a young girl. So you can imagine that it's a very awful situation. So while in the majority of the African countries, decades of female battles, feminist battles, have succeeded in or eradicating female genital mutilation or pushing for laws against them. In Liberia, this journey has just begun. And so in the movie, I interviewed 3 women, 3 activists against female genital mutilations, and 2 of them, unfortunately for you who saw the movie, they asked me not to be, to remain anonymous and not to show their faces, because they are running real risks for their lives, because these bush schools are run by secret societies that are very spread out in Liberia and also in Sierra Leone as well. But in Liberia, they are very powerful. And that's why the government so far has never approved a law against female genital mutilations, because these secret societies have really a big political power. So I would, with this movie, I wish, let's say, it's a sort of utopia. I wish to start a sort of international attention on this issue in Liberia. Maybe I will screen my movie also at the European Parliament, and I would like also at the African Union, because it's important that that Liberia changes this thing for women's rights and for girls' rights and for everything.
Thank you so much. Yes, what you are bringing us is really important, because as we can see, it's not a question of fighting against the practice, which is physically dangerous for women. It's not only a sexual mutilation, it's also a life threat. Brinco de vida. But it puts the females' lives in danger. Sorry, because if they speak up about the question, if they fight for not entering these schools, for avoiding the reproduction of this tradition and this idea that this is a good practice, then that must be maintained, because it's a local tradition. And but they are really becoming persons in danger if they speak up and fight for it, and because they are actually fighting for a change in society. It's not only a change in towards herself, but also a change in life and in politics in Liberia and in other countries where this practice is quite common. So
only one thing that I would like to add, because I forgot, and I think it's important, very shortly. Liberia was the first country in Africa to have a woman as a president. She was Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and so Liberia has this sort of, very important point in its history. And Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who is a Nobel Prize winner for peace, for her fight for women's rights, she succeeded only in outlawing female genital mutilation only for 1 year. And so she fought against this issue, but the huge political power of the civil societies stopped her. Someone tried to change things for women's rights, but the journey is still going on, and the fight is still hard.
Yeah, and showing this is very important. I will, Clara? Do you want to? English, talvez.
Okay, thank you, Antonia, for inviting me for this session, and it was really a pleasure to watch these movies and to come to know about what is going on in Liberia, and also about the second one. But now I would like to focus on the one on Liberia to start with, as we have, I believe we still have Emanuela with us. Yes, okay. It is indeed, well, I think that Janika already said everything that needed to be said about the horrors of FGM and how it is affecting people all over the world. There are 200 million women that suffered FGM all around the world. 500,000 is living in Europe. And Emanuela has just mentioned it because it's not a common practice in Europe, but it was at a certain time till at least till the 1940s. It's not that long ago. It was our grandparents' life, our parents' life actually, and it was done for psychiatric reasons. So, well, so much for that. But anyway, people now, like Janika was telling, they are mainly well, coming from migrant communities, actually. And sometimes it's even increasing in Europe as a reaction to discrimination against migrants that, of course, it makes a reaction from the part of these communities. Not really in Portugal, where it's not really happening like that, but in Sweden, for instance, with people coming from Eastern Africa. It's not an African practice, but it is well spread around Africa. And just to have an idea, the country where FGM is as largest number, so it's most accomplished, it's in Indonesia, so it's not really in Africa. It is this practice is spread all over the world anyway, nowadays. But going back to what Emanuela was just telling, what is surprising about this Liberia case, it's what Emmanuel was telling, it is that Liberia is, for once, the first African country to have a woman president. And she was a champion for human rights and essentially a peace builder. And that, I believe, it's also part of the problem, because she was the president that came up after a civil war, and she had a problem to solve with this country. Then she had to face an Ebola crisis. So, yeah, I mean, she needed to have the support from local communities. And that is a major point here. As they say at the beginning of the movie, and that's great that Emanuela started by that, by giving the voice to the people that are giving the opinion from the community. It is everyone wants you, I mean, everyone in the village wants the girls to be circumcised, because otherwise they won't be purified. And this idea about purification is something that you can find all around the world. And they won't be, well, marriable, if you want. They won't be eligible to have a husband and a traditional life. And most of the time, it's even the women that are forcing girls to endure FGM. For instance, within migrant families, it happens. The women of these families are the ones that are really pushing it, not that much the man of the family. It's easier sometimes to speak with the man of the family. But, well, that's one point in Liberia. And the other one, which is also paradoxical, it is that the Sunday, this initiation, this initiation societies, it is called the Sunday, it has always been presented. I believe that most of you are students of anthropology, so it has been presented as a kind of the example for a female initiation society in an African country. Most of them, they are male ones, and what you have, so for boys, and what you have, it's a kind of some not so visible rituals that girls will endure, and that most of the times they don't imply having FGM being practiced. But Sunday, it was always the example how women are powerful within the Sunday societies, not only in Liberia, as in Sierra Leone, for instance, but how they are powerful. All these initiation societies really the place where women show off their power. But at the same time, what we are realizing here, it is that this power, it's against what we call human rights. So that's the last point. Are human rights universals? That's really the big question behind, because we are fighting between an idea of human rights based on individual opportunities and the idea of the community rights that is present when we speak about FGM. And that's what most of the times these communities are telling you. It is it has always been practiced like that. And these are Western ideas, and they are paying to these activists that are receiving money from Western societies, etc., etc. Is our tradition. But on the other hand, you say, no, everyone in this world, in this planet, we have the same rights. And these girls, they have the right to education, they have the right to attend a normal school, and they have the right to choose if they want to endure FGM or not. And they can only choose when they are adults. Of course, they are not going to choose at that time. Sometimes it happens. Yeah, even an anthropologist endured it. I'm not quite sure if it was in Liberia, but it was within the Sunday Society, because she wanted to, you know, embody the experience, if you want. But she was an adult. It's completely different from these girls. So, yeah, this question about rights, it's really one of the big questions with an FGM. But as Jamika was saying, the FGM is now being banned in most of the countries in Africa, within the African continent, but also around the world. Most of the countries, they have banned it. And so I think Liberia was a very specific case. I don't know if you want to start discussing the other movie right now.
Yes, I was going to pass the word to Benedetta and then come back to the discussion of the other movie. Thank you so much, Clara. Benedetta, are you with us?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So we can hear you now, but I would like to make this transition, picking up from something that Clara just said, that in this secret societies of women in Liberia, they were a kind of the only place in society where these women could exercise power in a very significant way. And this is completely the opposite of the case of what you show in your movie, where these women in these three these countries in Afghanistan, Syria, and Iraq, these women are exercising their fight and exercising their power in order to liberate women and not to reproduce a kind of system that represses her and mutilates women, not only physically but also socially. So would you like to tell us more about the movie?
Yes, for sure. First of all, thank you for having me, and I would have rather be with you and be part of the conversation much better. That being said, yes, picking up on what you were just saying, in part, it's partly true. It's partly true for northern Eastern Syria, where now women have a completely different part of input in society. But we can see also in Afghanistan, both in Afghanistan and Iraq, still women need to go underground, and this is why we went to these shelters. And but despite that, there is like a public face of the struggle, and so this is actually what I believe is the difference. So this film starts with the idea. Since I'm a reporter and I worked for a long time in the region as a reporter, I started to notice how the media mainstream were portraying women. And most of the times, like now, of course, it's changing, thanks also for, YPG and the woman protection unit. But there is a tendency to see women in the Middle East veiled and with certain kind of, like, usually in need, usually in refugee camps and the first victims of war, and they're portrayed most of the time, so actually not all the times, as victims. So the idea of this film was to actually try to flip the coin. And yes, of course, women are victims. Women do live in refugee camps, but there are also other women that are organizing themselves and trying to build a better future for the generation to come, and to improve the situation and struggle for rights, and sometimes really basic rights, especially in places like Afghanistan. So the idea was to try to mix, the aesthetic of cinema and with a strong and driven message. So, we traveled as a whole woman crew, which, when we started like doing 3 years ago, was not so common, especially in war-torn areas. And we lived with the protagonist of the film, and we lived and stayed with them, and stayed with them and tried to understand what their lives is like. And let me tell you, it's a very difficult life as a general. And then you watch the film, and of course, if you have questions, I'm really, really happy to take them. But what I really believe is that these stories are an inspiration in a time in which there is a need to, like, a global women's movement that all together continue this path of struggle.
Thank you so much, Benedetta. And I think Clara, go back to Clara, who wanted to say something about your film, your movie as well.
Thanks, Antonia, again.
E depois passo a Janica.
Well, I really enjoyed the movie I Am the Revolution, because I think that nowadays we are more used to the idea that women are subject to military violence and and traditional violence, etc., etc. But particularly in places that are strongly armed, like the ones that have been shown, and of course within Syria and the fight against Daesh, we are not really expecting to see a movie that is showing us the other part of it. We do remember, there are at least two dates I think we should remember. One is in the year 2000, United Nations, and I think that is a little bit behind what we were seeing here in these movements, but maybe Vendetta could explain that better. But anyway, the Security Council of the United Nations launched a resolution, 1325, that is, presenting the problem of how armed conflicts are endured by women, with rape, with extreme violence used against women, with women working for the armies against their own will, etc., etc., etc. And they also promoted, and they are still promoting, and the United Nations are the one behind this. They are promoting a lot of initiatives all around the world concerning the involvement of women in process of peace building and peacekeeping. And part of it, of course, it's something that is not so obvious, like, for instance, supporting local mediators and group of mediators that are conducted by women, is supporting the African Architecture for Security and Peace, where women are always involved. So it is supporting women that are now fighting or that are now acting as peacekeepers or particularly peace builders. That was one point. The second one, I think you remember that 2 years ago, the Nobel Peace Prize went to two people that have been acting along this main war stage. One of them was a medical doctor from Congo who ran a clinic for women that have been victims of rape, and mostly due to the civil war in the country. And the second one was a girl that has been a sexual slave within Daesh, precisely like you see here. So, but anyway, all of this is always telling us the same. Women are victims, but so we have to empower them. And the idea is always empowering the other. And here what we are watching is women that are really fighting with the same, the same weapons as men, and that are really strong women in the field that are trying to have a new voice in places that are particularly affected by every kind of violence, be it armed or be it a political one. We can't forget, for instance, that either Iran, that was that was portrayed here, or Afghanistan, it had other kind of political regimes that were much more open to women participation than the ones that were installed after that. So we are watching at women that are fighting against political regimes. It's not just tradition or whatever it means, because tradition is something that is movable and it's malleable. That's something that also anthropologists I used to know. They are not only fighting about that, they are really fighting against a political regime, and they are fighting it with the same weapons. So I really enjoyed watching that. But I was curious when I was watching at the credits at the end of this movie, who are the organizations behind it? I mean, because for instance, we know they are referred, the NGOs that are interfering, but who are them? I would like to know a little bit more about that from Benedetta.
Thank you. Let me just say one thing. I think it's very important, especially when we talk about Rojava, and especially when we talk about Syria in the context in which the woman picked up the weapons, that this is a self-defense unit, first of all, and the military project does not go by itself. So alongside, as like in the movie we tried to show, alongside the military struggle, there is also a political project that continues and actually empowers other women. And it's not just about taking the weapons per se, but it's building the new society. Now, this is, I think it's very important because what I've learned, at least by traveling in these places, is to understand that the struggle, you need to take it as a whole and not just one part. So the military is never enough. Having a whole military unit is never enough to build like a more equal society. And I'm not too sure about your question. I'm not too sure which are the NGOs that you're referring in the credits, because for sure there is Madre that supports OFI, which is the organization in which Yanar can operate. Yanar and obviously the women around the movement that can operate in Iraq, that otherwise would actually not being able to move so freely and being able to do their work properly. But Madre is actually a small American organization that helps for like what are they called? Some specific thing. But that, if you're referring to that, and there are other organizations around, I think that we thank in the credits. We for sure thank Emergency, which is a medical NGO that took care of one of us in Afghanistan that was not feeling well. So if you can be a little bit more specific about the NGOs that you're referring to, I'll be happy to reply.
No, we did not understand very well this last. Can you, Benedetta?
Can you hear me?
Repeat the last sentence. Sorry.
That I said that there are several NGOs that are thanked in the film for different reasons. So I'm not too sure which one she wanted one.
Just a curiosity. Okay, so I'll address another point, and I'll do this in Portuguese. I'm so sorry to have Janica helping contributing to this discussion. And a ideia era também refletir pouco sobre o papel da família em todo este processo. Porque, na verdade, nós temos aqui simultaneamente uma dupla dimensão desta associação das mulheres à família e da família a reproduzir muitos destas das condições e das ideias e das próprias práticas de mutilação física das mulheres como forma de preparação para a vida, não é? como são legitimadas, mas também de reprodução das suas formas de subordinação dentro da família, dentro da sociedade e, portanto, de afastamento das relações de poder e das suas liberdades e independências. Mas, simultaneamente, também o que vemos é que a maneira como estas mulheres lutam algumas destas mulheres lutam para fugir dessas condições e escapar ao destino de subordinação e de privação de liberdade e de mutilação, passa por uma fuga à família. Ou seja, uma das coisas que nós vimos no segundo filme é muito evidente, a maneira como é preciso fugir à família para conseguir lutar pela sua independência e pela sua liberdade, mas de certa forma no primeiro filme também vemos alguns casos disso, de mulheres que precisamente escapam ao destino tradicional da família para fugir ao destino que lhes reservavam as escolas do mate e a sua mutilação. Não é? Queres falar também um pouco sobre essa questão? Com o microfone.
Realmente, essa questão de separação das vítimas com as famílias, com o objetivo de, ora é para irem à escola da mata e outra é porque querem ter uma certa liberdade. E no caso do filme da Benedita, que é o segundo filme, né? I Am Revolution. Então, mais ou menos vai mostrar isso como uma forma de empoderamento. As mulheres, quando se sentem mais empoderadas, querem mostrar isso porque vão ocupar um certo espaço onde dão visibilidade, onde dão vozes às mulheres. Essa separação de deixar a vida que supostamente é determinada para as mulheres, que é de casar, ter família, ter filho, e irem ser as próprias protagonistas da luta, né? Para irem à frente da batalha, para libertarem o povo. Isso já é uma revolução, é um certo poder que vão dar às mulheres. Então, as mulheres vão deixar de ser frágeis, como a maioria dos casos desses conflitos, os conflitos que se vê nesses países. As mulheres e as crianças são consideradas mais frágeis, mais carenciadas, que mais precisam de cuidado. Mas essas mulheres de Síria mostram uma outra cara da mulher. Uma mulher moderna capaz de também fazer o carro andar, a sociedade andar, e é isso. Então, esse afastamento da mulher da família está sendo uma nova cara da mulher, uma mulher já empoderada, uma mulher com resistência e com foco que é proteger a comunidade, que não é agora o papel só do homem, os homens entenderem isso. Enquanto que no outro filme já a mulher vai para a faixa da família, mas por um certo período para voltar àquele meio de família, mas como uma mulher preparada para segurar aquela família, para ser como uma raiz daquela família, quem vai sustentar a família, quem vai preocupar com o bem-estar da família, e não outro espaço. Enquanto que na Síria, este filme retrata um outro objetivo deste afastamento.
Estava agora tentada a abrir a discussão para o público e para ver se havia perguntas ou se há perguntas das redes sociais. Não sei se. Or if Emanuel or Benedetta want to say something more.
I could say something if I may,
Yeah.
because I found everything very interesting, but I was focusing on something that the anthropologist was saying before about the fact that female genital mutilation has been often considered a sort of tradition. So which is the border between a cultural tradition and the respect for human rights. And this is a debate that has been going on for a long time, even in Europe. For instance, you reminded that Europe, of course, every country in Europe has a law against female genital mutilation, but sometimes the debate was, is it right to approve a law against female genital mutilation, recognizing it as a sort of tradition, or is it better to consider female genital mutilation in the penal code like many others crimes, because it's a crime against the person, it's a mutilation, it's an amputation. So why considering it different from other amputations? So this is a very long debate, and it's interesting, and it's also weird that the only country in Europe which has a very long record, the only one who has a record of trials and penalties against cases of female genital mutilation is France, which is the only country in Europe which doesn't have a particular law against female genital mutilation, because they preferred to consider it as an amputation like any other ones, and they recorded the majority of the cases in the courts against female genital mutilation. So it's important, not to have a sort of a cultural relativism. So it's a crime. It's not only a violation of women's rights and of human rights, but it's an amputation. It's something that has been cut on the body without any medical necessity. So it has to be considered like that without any justifications, I think.
Yes. I was listening to you and thinking about the. I don't know if you have seen the other movie, I Am the Revolution, and there at some point the question was not about the physical mutilation, sexual mutilation, but a threat to your life, to your existence. If there was a case in particular where a girl said something to her brother, and he got annoyed and just shot her, so and killed her, and that's this kind of if we can generalize and broader a bit more the discussion, there is these ways of exerting violence against women and this social subordination, which are really a threat to the life of women, and not only and we must think about it in a more broader way, because sometimes we are actually talking about physical, not only sexual mutilations, but a mutilation of your life, of your existence. So that's and I was stressing this because of the day we are celebrating today, this International Day against violence against women, and this is a very important common point between the two movies we have watched. And do you want to say something about this question of excessive relativism, cultural relativism, and excess of cultural traditional legitimization of the genital mutilation? E depois também a Janica dizer alguma coisa em relação a esta questão da tradição como legitimação da mutilação genital feminina.
Isso em inglês. Se calhar em português. É? Now, I would like to say something about this discussion. This discussion about cultural relativism, etc. It runs mainly in the academic, at an academic level, because in the field, what you find, it's people that are willing to fight for women's rights, and they are really the champions. And so I'd like to remember someone that is from Guinea-Bissau. It's Fatmata Jabaldeh, that I'm sure that you know well. And she's one of the, she's really one of these fighters for against what are so-called the traditional harmful practices. And she's not the only one, of course. This is part of all these international agreements. This is part of the Maputo Protocol against violence against women. And the people you find in front of it are men and women, but a lot of women that are the ones that are fighting against it, and they are originating from the same societies where, for instance, FGM is practiced, where precocious marriage is practiced, etc. So much for tradition, so much for cultural relativism. I mean, people are always changing, societies are always changing, and this is part of the change. Sorry.
Yeah, but the argument of tradition is very much often used by the people who want to reproduce the system and these forms of mutilation.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that in this precise moment, we are having a project about precisely these voices that are against sexual and reproductive rights in West Africa. And yes, that's true. There are families that are evoking tradition, but they are becoming minority.
Yeah, sure. And it's fantastic that they are becoming minorities.
Em relação à tradição tá bem. Relativamente à tradição, eu acho como cada comunidade tem criado uma certa ordem social para manter aquela comunidade, e isso ao longo dos anos, de geração em geração, vai ser passado. E com isso, alguns homens ou mulheres, em benefício de uma certa coisa, criam alguma, alguma lei para impor numa certa sociedade. Então, mas de dizer que a tradição, ela sempre pode ser respeitada e continua, e pode ser valorizada, desde que não põe em causa saúde e os direitos humanos. Direitos humanos, que ela vai variando de acordo com sociedades, posso assim mencionar. Mas, no caso da mutilação genital feminina, ela tem os mais velhos das aldeias, alguns que já têm conhecimento das consequências que isso tem no corpo da mulher, na saúde da mulher, ao longo da vida toda, na vida toda da mulher. Então, alguns vão recusar esta prática. Alguns já estão a recusar e vão recusando esta prática, a dizer não, isso não é uma tradição. Se fosse uma tradição, não colocava em risco a vida das mulheres. Então, seria uma tradição como em algumas comunidades costuma-se ver as mais velhas a ensinarem as mais novas a saberem como ser independentes, alguns trabalhos manuais, a ter com recursos daquele meio social, por exemplo, como pescar, como fazer algumas redes para pesca e tudo mais. Talvez essa tradição, essa comunidade é uma comunidade que sobrevive da pesca, então tem que fazer isso para aquelas crianças aprenderem a se virar sozinhas. Outros ensinamentos, ajudar os mais velhos, isso é constante e vai ser valorizado para sempre, pronto. Mas quando se trata da mutilação genital feminina, não podíamos misturar isso com uma tradição intocável, porque ali está em jogo o corpo da mulher, o direito da mulher. Então, será que esta mulher tem consciência, aquelas crianças de 2 anos, 4 anos, 5 anos, têm consciência de que estão sendo submetidas a uma prática com um resultado futuro de servirem como esposas? Será que elas já estão a pensar nisso? Ou amanhã estão a pensar em casar-se? Acho que tem uma coisa que tem que ser... Se devem criar uma etapa de entrevista, eu acho que devem fazer isso, para passarem a entrevistar as crianças antes. Você pretende futuramente casar? Quem sabe? Porque assim não tem graça de decidirem o futuro das crianças antes delas mesmas saberem o que querem. Então, isso merece uma certa reflexão sobre essa prática de serem consideradas práticas como práticas tradicionais, como herança tradicional, né?
E as tradições também mudam, não é? Ou podem mudar.
Pois, e quem são responsáveis por essas tradições? São os homens. Estamos em constante evolução, então somos obrigados a evoluir de acordo com o mundo.
Obrigada. Comentários? É que eu não vejo. Sim, diga, Pedro. Há um microfone? Não.
Eu gostava de... Eu acho que a questão está aqui... Há uma questão muito importante que está a ser focada nesse debate. E que é até que ponto a tradição se pode, e de maneira que se pode, há uma coisa que nós temos como sendo importante para todas as pessoas no mundo, que é os direitos das pessoas. E eu acho que esta questão era uma questão que todas as pessoas, e sobretudo os antropólogos, que é aquilo que nós somos, devem sempre levarem em consideração. Eu gostava de saber também, e não há nenhum microfone, eu gostava de ter isto em inglês, eu gostava de saber qual é a opinião das pessoas que fizeram quanto a esta questão. Não sei se fiz entender ou não.
We have this Pedro, who is an anthropology student, and he's asking about this conflict, this contradiction between what is tradition and what are human rights, and this was previously been addressed, but he wants to hear a bit about what Emanuela and Benedetta think about this issue. Are you still with us? Oh, this is a bit strange.
Hi. I do not know if Emanuela wants to go first, but
you go first, please.
Obviously, it's tradition is unfortunately I haven't really understood what the activist from Ghana was saying, but I hope I don't repeat. I think that tradition sometimes, and especially in this case, it's used as a paramount in order to basically put violence on women. So because traditionally we have seen how the patriarchy and the system has oppressed women systematically in all the fields of life, saying it is tradition. So it's tradition for women to have to, this is the justification that the terrorist organization such as ISIS says, it's tradition that women needs to be covered. It's tradition that women get female genital infibulation. It's tradition for a woman to stay at home. It's tradition for a woman not to work. This is that justification that is used throughout in order to enslave women. And I think that, there are, of course, not all, there are certain traditions but we should start thinking critically about the society and the world that we live in and which kind of tradition we carry on. And I think that is such a huge debate, this one, that has so many different ramifications, not just a woman. You know, we can see, for instance, something that comes into mind right now is the whole debate over the statue in the United States. What is tradition? I think we should always think critically about tradition and the environment we live in order, you know, especially if it involves somebody else's, in this case, woman's body, woman's choice. And so for me, this is.
Thank you. Manuela?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Tradition has been for a long time a pretext for women's subordination, for patriarchy, and in fact, in the example of Liberia is interesting because this system of the bush schools in which female genital mutilation is practiced and which are considered the guardian of the tradition, of the culture of the ancestors, and that's why they are so powerful. Actually, they are a sort of business system because the let's say the teachers, the leaders of these bush schools of the Sunday Society, who are called Zoes. This is their traditional name. They receive money, a big amount of money compared to the average income of Liberian people. So they receive money from the parents of the girls when the girl gets in the school, and the families pay big amounts of money, and also they give rice, they give oil, and other kinds of gifts. So during the years, this system of the bush schools, together with the female genital mutilation, has become a sort of business system, and so that's why the Zoes, let's say the spiritual leaders of the Sunday Society, don't want absolutely to give up their job and to give up this kind of system, and they use tradition, culture as pretexts, justifications for this system. I would like to give another example. I've just written an article on El País in Spain about a young woman in Kenya, in the Maasai communities, who have been fighting for at least 10 years. So she's very young, but she began when she was a girl, fighting against female genital mutilation. And she succeeded in convincing all the people of the community, all the traditional cutters, to give up this tradition, and she invented a thing that she called alternative rite of passage. So the girls become women with the ceremonies which are the same as in the past, but without the cut. So she invented other things to say, this is our tradition, this is a rite of passage from childhood to adulthood for girls, so we have to celebrate it, but we cut off the female genital mutilation. And all the communities in an area in the south of Kenya, they agree with that, because they felt that their tradition is still there. It's only, let's say, only the cut of the girls' genitalia have been removed from this tradition, but all the things, the ceremony, the dances and the singing, it's kept there. So this is an interesting way to turn traditions into something better.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very powerful insight. These alternative ways to this idea that the only cut is cutting the cut.
Yeah, yeah.
The cut out of the equation, and changing tradition in a more respectful way. And we are a bit on time, and I will just pass the microphone to a last comment to Clara and Janica. And just to wrap up. No? A final comment or...
Ok, so
não
much for
precisas.
tradition.
Não precisas.
So much for tradition. Pode ser em português?
Pode.
Está bem. Eu julgo que quando se fala a partir aqui do São Jorge em Lisboa sobre o que é o empoderamento das mulheres, ou o que é os problemas que as mulheres enfrentam, não se tem propriamente a noção de como é que estas coisas são vividas no terreno. E eu acho que nós vimos aqui dois filmes que nos mostram dois opostos quase de uma realidade que é sempre a mesma. A questão da mutilação genital feminina, que aqui foi mostrada na perspectiva de um país que ainda não fez a ratificação dos acordos que são acordos internacionais, mas é uma das primeiras questões que surgem nesta arena. Mas a questão da participação das mulheres na guerra, da participação das mulheres em situações de empoderamento político é de facto a grande agenda dos nossos dias e é de facto a grande agenda em locais onde isso não acontece e onde esta diferença faz a diferença. E portanto eu acho que estes filmes, ao mostrarem-nos os dois opostos, por um lado, um tipo de reivindicação que já vem desde os anos 80 e que está sempre em cima da mesa, e por outro lado, aquilo que está a ser realizado agora e que é extremamente efetivo em termos das comunidades locais, de conseguir que as mulheres assumam um outro papel e uma outra voz. E acho que estes dois filmes mostraram muito bem esses dois aspectos.
Resumidamente, gostaria só de agradecer a oportunidade e dizer que com estes dois filmes consegue-se perceber de perto essa interseccionalidade que estamos a viver e que a luta está sendo aderida de formas diferentes, apesar de alguns ainda com passos lentos e alguns com passos já mais avançados. Mas o objetivo é para conquistar a nossa liberdade, garantir os nossos direitos e lutar contra qualquer tipo de violência contra as mulheres. E dizer que queria só lembrar uma coisa que com esses grupos de militares me faz lembrar o que aconteceu também lá em Guiné há alguns anos, na época de colonização, que as mulheres também tinham aderido à luta, mas que não tinham esse tal de poderes igual às mulheres da Síria atualmente, né? Isso, mas que elas também tinham lutado em duas vertentes. Uma luta é contra o colonizador e outra contra o sistema patriarcal, mas que, enfim, garantiu a liberdade nacional, mas não garantiu a liberdade das mulheres. O direito das mulheres ainda está bem atrasado. Então, com isso, com este filme, eu acho que vai me criar novas visões em relação à questão de MGF também, e vamos procurar, junto com a minha orientadora Olímpia, vamos procurar outros contatos, como poder ainda mais incentivar as mulheres a aderirem a esta luta, seja lá na África, na Ásia e aqui na Europa. Temos que aderir a estas lutas porque sabemos que as mulheres sofrem de maneira diferente e é preciso termos consciência disso e saber como atacar. Obrigada.
Muito obrigada. And I will thank you all for being with us in this debate, and through your movies, and in particular thanking Benedetta and Emanuela, who through your movies helped us to show how with films we can pass and show the inequalities and the violence against women, and through this we can fight against these violence and inequalities, as Janica was saying, and promote awareness and empowerment, which is the title of the project of our festival this year. And thank you so much, Emanuela and Benedetta. Do you want to say very quick last words on the debate?
I just would like to thank you. It would have been so wonderful to be there with you, but unfortunately, this pandemic stopped us. And so, thank you very much. And it was very interesting. And I hope to have the chance to see also the other movies of the festival.
Thank you so much. And Benedetta, she's out. So, thank you so much. Obrigada a todos e continuem a vir ao festival.
Aproveito para agradecer meu tradutor.
Agora era a altura de grande